Welcome back to Typically Unique. I'm Kim Aponte, and I'm here with my husband, Carlos.
Hello.
And today we are going to just have some real talk about the effects of all of our emotions and the trauma that we went through during all of this. So
yeah, it was an emotional toll it took on us, and I think we both had our own private feelings about it. We maybe talked about that a little bit at the time, but in hindsight, now doing this podcast, we've really started to talk a lot more. I think this has been semi-therapeutic for us because we really understood our mindset, and a lot of things happened along the way, even after all this, that I think we're finding out a lot about each other and what we went through. And I think there's many moments that I think we have empathy for each other.
Yes.
And on the opposite side of that, I think we have some frustrations with each other, that we had to work with and work through. So it affected us, pretty greatly. I think us in our marriage, us as a family, as a whole. I mean,
yeah, each of us individually went through our own trauma, and then that affected our relationships with each other, so then that affects your family dynamic as a whole. And, we're looking back now 12 years later and everything that, we've done since then, with good, good outcomes with some things and a whole lot happening in between that,
right.
We'll be going back and filling in some episodes about that. But,
and for this, sorry to interrupt, but for this podcast, I think the good thing is we're here, right? We're here together and we're doing this together. And, there was some shaky moments there, but, this was a good outcome, that we are together. We did a lot of work from there to here. Right, and we want to share a lot of that with.
We've learned
folks.
a lot and grown a lot along the way. But looking back now, we wanted to reflect on what were some of the things that we felt affected us negatively. What were some of those negative impacts of going through 8 months living in a hospital with a child battling cancer, and what that did, and then facing the life-threatening bone marrow transplant and all of that. So,
and this podcast is our memoir. So it's our memory of that situation.
Right.
We reference Aiden and Carly a lot, and maybe we will during this particular episode, but we're going to keep it to what we remember, right? We'll try not to speak for them,
right,
even though they're, of course, big characters in this story, but we're going to try to do it from our perspective and not try to say Aiden felt this or Carly felt that, because we don't know.
Right.
We are still learning. Kim felt this and Carlos felt that.
Right.
So we want to, I think, bring this particular episode to talk about how we felt. Would you like to start, Kim, or shall I?
Well, I think one of the biggest impacts was our separation and just being isolated away from each other.
100%.
That was a huge negative impact on our relationship.
We've known each other a long time. We've been together, for many, many years, at this point. We knew each other in high school. We've always had the hometown connection. We've always had connection to sports,
And loved each other deeply.
Yeah, and all of a sudden we are separated and experiencing things at home or in the hospital, and she's not sharing that experience with me, and I'm not sharing her experiences with her. So it's almost like I feel, so one of my personal feelings was that I felt if I wasn't involved with something that happened to Kim at the hospital, that she would have some resentment towards me. Like, I had to deal with this. You were at home eating Applebee's with Carly on a Saturday night.
Oh, yeah.
And I am here every weekend. You know, I'm not having any fun on the weekend. I'm here every weekend doing this, you know, and you're there having a good time with Carly, you know, and I could feel that.
It was hard because I was working all week, and then, you know, everybody lives for the weekend, right? I didn't get a weekend.
Nope.
You know, and I know Aiden got no weekend, so I'm not, you know.
We're not speaking about the kids.
Can't compare to that.
Yep.
But for myself,
right.
It just felt like no break, no time for fun, no time to let down, and, you know, just that took a toll on me.
And so let me have some empathy for you and let me advocate for you. So, you know, even though I was at the hospital, you know, from Sunday afternoon until Thursday when you came up from the hospital. So, I mean, I was there, you know, kind of a long period of time, but I had probably more downtime because I had, you know, Fridays, which I'd still work that full day, but I had all day Saturday off. I didn't have to do anything, you know, at all. So, you know, I had a full day to recover, either with sleep. I didn't have to get up and go to work, you know, either with sleep or just veg out in front of the TV or whatever, you know, I could do. You didn't really have that downtime because you were working all week, even though you were less days at the hospital. You were constantly on high alert, never really had any downtime.
Yeah, and I didn't read this journal entry, but I came across it. This was from, you know, the first 5 rounds that we did. It was so crazy that I had written how I woke up at home, but thought I was at the hospital.
I do that all the time.
It was crazy. Yeah. So, yeah, that took a toll on us. That was really hard.
You know, and the other part of this was, you know, and I made the analogy, I guess, in the last episode where I said it felt like a marathon. I ran a full marathon.
Yeah.
Said I'd never do this again. And then all of a sudden, you know, somebody's standing there with a starting pistol saying, we got to do this again.
Yeah.
You know, and it's almost, you know, I guess I don't want to do another analogy, but I guess what I'll say is I thought that was behind us. You know, I thought I could erase that from my mind or just have that be in our history, in our past, and never have to deal with this again. And
we didn't have time to catch our breath, or we barely had time to catch, you know, our breath. You know, we did have the summer to, like, you know, try to, but, you know, that was the time where Aiden was still having a lot of, you know, outpatient procedures and follow-ups and checkups and lots of medication and, you know, still a lot of medical things. By the time we got back to school in September, you know, that was when the normal was starting, and we barely got a couple months of that. So, yeah, it just seemed like we didn't catch our breath, and then we were slammed again. And then when we were slammed, it was shocking fear. I was just frozen in this fear and just living on that for the rest of this time, you know, and I think that kept me kind of shut down.
And the fear came from probably a couple places, well, maybe 3. One is we didn't know. We didn't know what we were getting into. You know, this wasn't on our radar, right? And then all of a sudden it shows up. You know, the second thing is we thought the first instance was a truly life and death situation, and
we just leveled up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a great a great phrase there. Level it up. we absolutely leveled up, and fear comes in many forms, right? You could have that shocked face, or you could recoil, and I think I was kind of a recoiler. I think Kim always expressed her emotions, and maybe that was semi-therapeutic for her, you know, to get it off her chest, release that pressure valve, which we talk a lot about in our relationship, you know. But for me, it was just bottled up, you know, constantly bottled up. And, you know, to be honest with you, nobody was coming around to me and saying, you know, hey, you look cool, you're acting cool, are you cool? Nobody cared, you know, and I wasn't offering, you know, but if Kim was bouncing off the walls, everybody was running over there. Hey, what's wrong? Do I stay away? Do you need a hug? But for me, and maybe guys in general,
quiet, yeah.
Quiet. Nobody inquired. Nobody cared. And I was just stuck in a corner with my own thoughts and feelings, and nobody ever asked.
Yeah.
No one ever asked. Ever. I mean,
sorry, baby.
That's all right. But that kind of leads to lack of communication, right?
We just didn't share with each other either.
Right. I mean, I could have came out and said, hey, I'm not ready for this, and not ready doesn't mean we aren't going to go through the process, but, I may need some help here. I may need to, talk to somebody, or we may need to do something with schedules, or maybe I need to take FMLA or something, because I'm trying to, we got a house we got to keep up, we got bills we got to pay, and we're already strapped as it is, and trying to keep things going. And so I got that pressure going on. And, part of me was like, I was just trying to shut everything out.
And when your brain is racked with all of your thoughts are just on what ifs and, all the medical that's going on and your child's, likely outcomes. And that's all you're fixated on and focused on. But then you have big meetings coming up that you have to prepare for.
Or a trip you got to take.
Trying to, that was a lot. That was a lot. That takes up more of your mental capacity, I think, and you're just spent after that. So, we just wanted to paint the picture of the effects that a medical trauma like this can have on people, because we all are going to deal with some situation probably at some time. We're very lucky if you don't have to go through that. So by sharing this, we're hoping that it will help others, as well as it's helping us to look back now, because I mean, we're kind of proud about the way we've come through this together, but it was a long road to get here.
And it broke us. It broke us mentally. It broke us physically. It broke, I wouldn't say it broke our love. I think we still had love for each other. We just weren't sure if we could coexist. Or
we were just coexisting. Just going through the motions at some point.
I remember having this vivid thought, which I never shared with Kim until earlier today, is that if Aiden didn't make it, we weren't going to make it, Kim and I. I could feel that coming. And many reasons around that, right? Which we talked about earlier. I don't know if we need to go on into all that now, but
right.
I think you had even mentioned that statistically, that's probably
a high likelihood with relationships like.
But I had a distinct feeling that if Aiden didn't make it, there would be so much, sadness and pain and unfortunately blame that we would not make it. And, I'm glad that didn't happen, neither of them two things. But I was, again, sitting in the corner with my own feelings.
And those are the thoughts that go through your head when you're going through things like this. It's not, it's called trauma for a reason. A reason. So we're looking back now thinking those are probably some of the things that impacted us back then at that time. So, a long time afterwards, we finally reached out for some help. So I was able to, go talk to a counselor and work on myself. And then that in turn helped us as a couple, and we have done all kinds of counseling, and we are big advocates of it, and we don't come from a generation where that was supported or suggested, or we're the rub some dirt in it, shake it off, plow through generation, and so it was a big leap for probably me more than you to actually dive into that arena and ask for help and start that process. But what a game changer. What a game changer to finally start like understanding yourself, and not only yourself, but someone validating how horrible of an experience you just went through and how that affects, humans.
Yeah. Yeah. I've, and Kim and I have debate about this, but I've always been an advocate of counseling. That's something even we talked about in some earlier episodes where I was trying to convince Aiden and ultimately Kim that Aiden needed some counseling or some diagnosis or something, So I've always been a, observer of society. I'm not a big participant in that. I've always been semi-shy. So I've always been the observer in society. And I just know that that is helpful. And I've been an advocate of it. It just seemed everybody around me wasn't on the same page, So that's one of those things that I took to the corner with me and just sat with, So did I present it in the best way? Probably not. Did I over advocate for it? Absolutely not. If I started getting pushback, okay, let's not do it then. But it turned out to be everything I thought it would be, and then some, because we still do it today. Mm-hmm. We're still having counseling today. And it's funny because I think it's a stigma. You're in counseling, and you have mental health problems, or, your marriage is on the rocks, or you don't know how to deal with your kids.
Depends on the person, and generation. But yeah, there is a stigma.
But to me, I'll be on meetings with customers, suppliers, my colleagues, and I'll say, I learned in counseling, and this almost translates, and they almost look at me like, how can you say? And I am proud of it. Yeah. I am not in the closet about counseling. I am loud and proud when it comes to it. I tell some of my closest colleagues, some people that I travel with, about some of my experiences about counseling and some of the things that I've learned, and they've instituted some of that in their relationships, and it's come back to us a year or two later. This just happened to us this past week, where a colleague of mine, we were at a work event, Kim was there, came up to us and said, I'm still using some of the tools that you talked about, and my relationship's so much better. And I'm an advocate. I've always been an advocate, but it took some convincing,
I don't know,
or life events to happen to make the rest of us fall in line with that,
Yeah, there's so many preconceived notions about it, or, depending how you're raised or whatever. But, it's how cool is it? I like to learn new things and just be knowledgeable in general. But how awesome it is to understand yourself better. And to learn that it is possible to control certain things, or have better control, I should say, and just understanding, things about the brain and emotions and all that. So
can I brag on you without you stopping me or editing this out? Could you take some positive?
We'll see.
Okay. So when we started going to counseling, not to get too deep in it, because we'll probably talk a lot more about that later, but it just goes to show that the effort and the passion that Kim had to learn about AML and Bruton's disease and all that. When we went to counseling, I gave my 100% effort, in those sessions. I tried to take those tools and use them. Kim went well above and beyond that. If a term was brought up in those sessions, or we were labeled something, which some of those labels were painful, and some of those labels were like, oh, what is that? Kim would go seek it out, understand it, and bring it back to the session and said, you mentioned this term, I learned a little bit more about that, I see some of that in us or me or him, and I would like to understand this a little bit more because it's resonating with me.
Yes.
And I think that enhanced the counseling because this is Kim's favorite phrase, you have to be a willing participant.
Yes.
You can go to counseling all you want, but if you feel like, I don't need to be here, it is not going to help one bit.
And you have to do the work when you're outside the room on your own to get the true benefits of it and to have it be long lasting too. So,
but I think counseling was, I think, a big thing, but
to heal us down the road.
Yeah, but that's not everything that was kind of going on at this time. If we reflect back, during this time, we had a whole new set of concerns, a whole heightened sense of fear. And I think for us, it drew a little bit of a wedge, but we were still trying to find ways to connect, which, we did ultimately seek out the Ronald McDonald House so we could be together, alone, away from Aiden, to give him a little bit of time, which he was wanting so desperately. Gave us time to sit and talk about something else except Aiden's condition, right? We did that for the first 2 hours, and then the last hour before we fell asleep was like, well, how's work going? And just life stuff, which we had never talked about that much. So
yeah, it just consumes you.
Yes. And I think the other thing that happened there was, and I think we've had life moments that have given us, and I hate to use this term because I think it's a very strong term, but for lack of a better term, PTSD, right?
Oh, yeah.
And we experienced some of that, not like in the military and all those things.
Just that, right?
But, if you look at traumatic life events, we were suffering in some way, some of that, and had no understanding of what that was, how to deal with it. So there's a lot of factors that go into, I think, what we experienced and what started happening along the way.
And if we went through that as grown adults, imagine the impact that had on the patient, what that did to Aiden and Carly, what that did to her.
Right.
And, we're not going to speak for them, but I could just imagine.
But I think, you alluded to this in a previous episode, and maybe you can speak to it now, because I think we learned a lesson that if kids are going through this, parents are going through this, our extended family is going through this, I think the community, the healthcare community, should also offer mental health care during these times.
Oh, yes.
This is again, lack of a better term, a post-traumatic stress issue that should be talked about. That, look, you are going through some things, you're going to experience some things, you're going to see some things that are going to affect you negatively. Why wait until you have been struck with it?
Right.
And maybe
or have a negative outcome or impact from it. Why does something bad have to happen before people get help?
Yes.
Oh, we're diving into that question big time on a future episode.
Right.
But ever since we've gone through this medical trauma with Aiden, I've always said, why don't they offer mental health care as part of the care? It should be part of the care, or at least offered. Just like with the haircuts. They're going to lose their hair. Right. Offer to shave their head. They're probably going to suffer trauma. Offer them mental health care.
And it's almost there's a spectrum of this, right? When we were offered that opportunity, it took a lot of convincing for you to say, hey, let's do it. When they kind of...
But they didn't offer, we asked.
Yeah, and when they kind of faded away, we were like, well, hey, let's get that back in, right? So it probably needs to come from the healthcare professionals to make that happen. And it doesn't have to be, come in here for 55 minutes and we're going to talk about, all the bad things in your life. It could be, very small steps, just to integrate it somehow without anybody knowing, hey, how do you feel? Build some type of relationship or communication tools. We didn't have the tools to talk to Aiden. We didn't have the tools to talk to each other, and we knew something was going on, but we were like, let's make him better first. And then we'll
lost in the fear and lost in the focus of just trying to get our son healed. You did make me think, though, one thing that they do have in place is that was probably the role of that child life specialist, even though it's not mental health care, I'm sure that's in place to try to help with mental health, which is a positive thing, but it's not what we're talking about. It's not the same thing that we're talking about.
I guess I would have to look at that through a different lens, but I didn't feel any of that was, not that she wasn't spectacular and tried to,
well, I guess I'm just looking at it as like trying to keep your mind off things and keep you busy and that type of help. Yeah. So I don't know. We were just kind of reflecting and thinking of what would we recommend? We've kind of done that through here, but I guess we want to help change that stigma too, and to make it okay. It is okay to ask for help. When you need it, So.
And I guess I'll go back to one more thing. I'm a pretty big guy, and for someone like me to kind of say it to my colleagues, I always get that look like, you, and I think I say it with such positivity and joy and happiness. And no shame attached to it, that I think maybe it will hopefully change some people's minds, change one or two, and that's it. But a lot of this too, though, I think one of the other things that we've advocated in the past and going through this is you did a fantastic job with the journaling and having that. We are still referencing a lot of that stuff back then. And I would tell everybody, even the dads or the husbands or the dudes out there that, it is a good thing to journal, even though that it may not be in our DNA, but it is something that I learned to do. It is something that has really helped us and benefited us by having those journals. And it doesn't have to be your deepest, darkest thoughts all the time. It could just be, hey, what's going on in the moment? What are we doing about it? How can we make this better? So I think that's important. And another thing too is maybe something we didn't do all that well was maintain relationships. I know I did not a good job in that, but we had a community and extended family and people that were very supportive and helpful. When we went back the second time, I just wanted to be left alone.
I think we both checked out.
Yeah.
We were just, I don't know if we had any energy back in us, but we certainly weren't reaching out to other people. We weren't even reaching out to each other. So
right.
that was not good. So we were trying to think of what could we say as kind of like tips or advice or things to look out for, that you got to kind of force yourself to do that, to maintain those relationships.
Right.
Especially our relationship, we should have really that's got to be, you got to keep that up on your priority list. I just only had, healing Aiden at the top of my list, and everybody suffered from that. You did, Carly, it's hard to keep that balance with your other children at home too. Those are all challenges.
And I don't think I could even ask for it, even though I wanted it. I knew that there was a lot of disconnection going on. I was probably too afraid to ask for it because the repercussions would be, what are you talking about? We got a kid over here prepping for a bone marrow, and you want, me to rub your neck and tell you how nice of a guy you are? Get out of here. That's what I was afraid of. I wasn't going to ask for it. And, I think Kim in the same way, when she was, triggered with something and, outside of her mind for a minute, maybe she just needed me to run up and give her a hug and tell her it'd be okay. And I was running the other way, Jack. I didn't want any part of that. I didn't want to be in the crosshairs. So it happened with both of us, and we both, probably could have came together better. We could have communicated better, but we didn't at all. So,
yeah. So, we're just starting this bone marrow transplant treatment, and we're going to continue on our episodes with that and just describing that process and these hard, how hard it was going through this. But we thought this was the perfect time to interject this, especially, having already been through, and we really, at this point, staring this in the eyes at this on our timeline, these were all the feelings that we were having, but we now have the hindsight, to look back on it too. So we will see you in our next episode, and we'll be talking more about what that transplant procedure and our time at the hospital for that was like.
And it wasn't easy.
Yes, it's hard.
Yep.
But we'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye.